Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? Y'all can do a little bit better than that. We came all the way from Atlanta. You know, tell me y'all to say good morning in Texas. Nobody say good morning back. Good morning.
Good morning.
Glad to have you guys involved out with me this morning. I'm Stan Washington, National Director for HEAL Collaborative. We're here this morning to offer you a program. We hope it will be insightful, encouraging for you. As we talk about small cell lung cancer, HEAL does this all over the United States, making sure that we have information out there. We talk about diversity, talk about health equity, those things that are mattering in our community. Today we're here at Paul Quinn College. We want to do the same thing. We want to make sure that you take this information back to our communities, to our churches, and different organizations, and provide information to you from the HEAL Collaborative Organization. With that, we'll ask Mr. Dean West to come down from Paul Quinn College, give us a welcome. He'll be followed by our National Vice President, Mr. Howard Moses of HEAL, and we'll get our program started. Dean, would you like to come this morning? Give him a hand as he comes this morning. We're all alive.
We're all alive. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Paul Quinn College. It's pretty much an honor to be here. And we talked earlier that health disparities are critical. And so this is one of them. This is in partnership with what we consider our social justice initiative, the African American Leadership Institute, where we deal with a holistic approach to just balancing our lives and the community we're in. So we've been the partnership in that respect. Let me end with, let's send an apology. We had a power surge earlier this morning, and so it's kind of down for a second, and it's cooling, but certainly we want to acknowledge that, and thank you for understanding that some things we just can't control, but we're working feverishly to make it work. But the conversation is ongoing, and it's critical in that respect. So thank you, and we look forward to a great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. We're happy to be here with you this morning as well. We want to bring up our National Vice President and Corporate Treasurer for HEAL, and you're also going to tell you about one of our collaborative sponsors, which is Amgen, and we're going to move the program right along so that we can make sure this information comes into your mind, and so you can make sure that we get this information to our community. Would you welcome our Vice President, Mr. Howard Moses, this morning?
Again, good morning. It's great to be with you all today. I know we have individuals online here watching us as well. Good morning. Good morning. Listen, this is an important conversation for our community. We do these because it makes a difference. And my name is Howard Mosley. I am corporate treasurer for HEAL Collaborative. Nobody told me that when I got off the plane in Dallas that there's going to be 3 digits.
I would have told you.
Three. Not 2. 3 digits. And so it is an honor and privilege to be here today. Our organization is here to ensure that we bring trusted information to the community about our health. And so we want to work with collaborative partners that will bring the community out to try to make a difference in this space. And so we're here today to bring this information. Now, you don't do this without having support from organizations that are willing to lock on with you. And today we have the Biotech Corporation, Amgen, who actually is the sponsor of this event. They are leading in the area of a lot of therapeutic areas, but lung cancer is a space where they have done an awesome job in bending the curve on helping move positive outcomes in this disease. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge work that they've done. And I know we got some people here from Amgen, and I wouldn't bring them down here, but they don't want to put them for But, great people, please put your hands on them. Let me just say this. There are many opportunities in our community to put your hands on a multi-billion-dollar, multinational, international corporation like an Amgen. They are here today because they do care. So we want to make sure that we acknowledge what they've done. This is an important event for those of you all who are here and those that are online, that this information that you're going to find it is unique in its approach and it is impactful. So I want you to lean in, take notes, and we're going to get this program started. With that, I'll turn it back over to my good friend. He hails from Memphis, Tennessee, ladies and gentlemen. He and I started together in the Georgia legislature. He taught me everything I know about politics, which I got wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for my friend, our moderator today, Mr. Dan Watson.
All right, thank you so much, Howard. I won't tell anybody I sat beside this guy for 10 years, what that was like. But anyway, we're glad to have you this morning. We're going to start our program, first of all, by making sure that you understand this. If you feel like you're getting a little hungry, I'm going to take a break and just step outside for a little while. But we're going to try to move the program in such a way that we have some fun, we get some great information, and we'll make sure that we have things that we can take home with us as well.
Thank you.
Oh, man, get it right there. Okay. We're going to start our program today, which I think is going to be very eventful for us, with a fireside chat. And that's where we have two people going to talk to us about their journey, so to speak, of what they had to deal with. And we'll have two persons with us today. The first person is going to be the Deputy Regional Director of Minority Outreach, Liam, Office of Senator Todd Young from Minneapolis, and that's Ms. Veronica Forbes. Y'all give her a hand as she comes. She's going to be moderating this part of our fireside chat. How are you this morning? All right, and then I'm not still here. I'm trying to give you my likeness. Right. And my good friend I just met, he's an Air Force Master Sergeant, retired Air Force Master Sergeant. That's okay because I'm Navy, so he's a veteran. Would you welcome Master Sergeant? This is retired Master Sergeant Gene Fidel Sr. Give him my hand as he comes this morning. Our lung cancer survivor. Thank you, Master Sergeant. They're going to have a candid discussion about diversity and prevalence, some disparity, give a little bit of Sandy introduction about caregiving and those things and navigation, but we'll give them a few minutes to talk about what we came here for and their response to their lung cancer and lung cancer survivorship. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. As he stated, I'm Ryan Ford. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I am also a patient advocate. My mother was a lung cancer patient who unfortunately did not survive her disease, but I understand the path, and as a prior public health professional, I understand the path of these type of situations. It gives me great pleasure today to chat with Eugene, as I'm going to call him. I've gotten to know him. Gene and Eugene, that I got to chat with a bit. And I always try to give a little bit of background on somebody because I wanted to know about his resilience with this disease and how he persevered, because I understand that this is a journey and so forth. So, Gene, tell me just in a few words about you being in the Air Force. I think that you serving our country kind of set the foundation for some things in your life.
Can you? I served 20 years, 13 days, and 17 hours in the Air Force. I'm retired.
A little closer.
I'm retired Air Force. I was an aircraft electrician. I started out. By the time I retired, I was a superintendent. I worked on research aircraft, jet engine aircraft, turboprop aircraft, and now I served in Southeast Asia. I first went to Southeast Asia, Vietnam era, in 1965. The area that I was in, it was not easy. That's why I was sprayed with Agent Orange. It was an accident.
Yeah, that story resonates with a lot of service members. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for your service. We all would like to thank you for your service. So, can you tell me a little bit about your lung cancer journey? About what that took place? I know that there were some screenings, there were several doctor visits. Can you tell me just in a couple of words of like how that path, was for you?
It took a while because once I was sprayed and I got sick about a week and a half later, not only did I get sick, but they put me in a dispensary. To make a long story short, they were going to carry that me out of Southeast Asia into the Philippines for treatment. My temperature broke at about 4 days. I had 104 temperature. And then from there, I got back to my duty station in Japan. And prior to rotating back to the States, they handed me my medical records because they thought I had round pneumonia. And when I got back to the States, I was assigned to Kelly Air Force Base, which is next door to Wolfram Hall Medical Center, which is the Air Force Medical Hospital. In August of '69, I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, pulmonary sarcoidosis. One of the tests that they did on me was a lung biopsy. They called it, so they stuck a needle in my chest and they stuck a needle in. The results came back with scar tissue. They monitored that scar tissue all my lung from '69 all the way up to 2019 when it started growing. Once it grew, they said it was small cell carcinoma and I had lung cancer.
Wow, what a journey. I mean, did you have several doctors in this path? I mean, were people asking you questions? Were they being thorough in their examinations? What was that like?
It was kind of difficult because, number one, by having a sarcoid, no one, I won't say no one, some of the people knew what it was. But I had to teach a lot of my doctors what sarcoid was. And after I got hold to the cancer, my primary care at VA told me wherever I needed to go, and that's to my son, he would see where I got treatment. And I had a navigation bronchoscopy accomplished. I had another lung biopsy. I had a PET scan, and after the PET scan, they confirmed that I had lung cancer, and within 45 days, they removed my right upper lung.
So your story has a good ending, seems like, because you're here with us to talk to us today. And so we're very pleased to know that. So the treatment that you received, can you tell me what types of treatments you received? Was it surgery, you said, and then there was, what other treatments did you receive?
I had chemotherapy along with the 4 treatments of chemotherapy in reference to cancer. And once the second treatment came about, because of the sarcoid, it affected my peripheral neuropathy. And that turned into polyneuropathy. And the doctor, my oncologist, Dr. Jan, he did real good. He's up in Denton. The doctor did the navigation of bronchoscopy. His name slipped, but he did do navigation of bronchoscopy. And after all of that took place, I'm still here today.
Well, we are so glad, and I'm glad that he is here to talk to us today. And I think he's got a secret weapon. One of his sons is a doctor, and you have 3 sons, right?
Yes, I do.
And one of them is a doctor. So, knowing that about health disparities and things that sometimes are not overlooked in our community, do you think that your son being a doctor was an asset for your situation?
Oh, yeah. It definitely was. Plus, he had the opportunity to speak to every one of my care providers. And he met, I believe it was 2 of them, during my treatment. And my youngest son, along with him, came to the facility that I had the surgery at, and they had an opportunity to speak to people.
So with that, one of the things that gives the industry, the pharma industry, the ability to use drugs and treatment and so forth, is the ability to have clinical trials so that they can determine, how these drugs and how treatment will work for individuals. Were you ever involved in a clinical trial?
No,
Okay.
no, that's right.
Okay. Would you have ever, especially being exposed to Agent Orange, would you have thought that that's something that maybe someone might have brought to your attention at some point?
No, I didn't really hear about Agent Orange until a few other things during my career in transplant. General Zumbo, his son, was a full colonel. He contacted Agent Orange, and he died as a result of that. That's when the military started paying attention to him. My primary care in VA, he made sure that I had whatever treatment I needed. I also had a primary care on the outside, Michael Adams, and he made sure that I saw top doctors.
That what I hear you saying is that treatment and valid treatment, the fidelity of treatment is very important in these situations.
That's good.
And so, with that being said, treatment and other things, is there anything that you would tell people out there that might be going through the same situation with this disease?
Yeah.
Mike?
There are three specific things that people need to be aware of. Number one is exercise. You need to make sure you do good exercise. Number two would be nutrition. You have to have good nutrition because as long as you eat well, and Mike gives that credit to my wife, she made sure that I ate well. After 59 years, you don't go against what she said. And the other one is, let's see, I got it written down here. I took notes. Hold on just a minute. You have to stay active and sleep well. Because if you don't sleep well, you're defeating part of the treatment system. There's one other thing that I want to mention too that I couldn't find anything on, and that's communication. You need to communicate with significant others, your doctors, everybody, and let someone know what's going on with you. You need to know and understand your body. Because a lot of times you go to a doctor, the doctor is not going to know your body. You tell your doctor what's wrong with your body. Because a lot of you say can be wrong.
Yep.
So,
Well, and just one more anecdote. One of the things that a lot of things you noted are very, very standard, but one of the things that we also note in the public health space is cessation of smoking. We know that smoking is a big contributor to a lot of cancers, and nicotine and all the carcinogens that are in tobacco products and so forth. You told me a story about yourself, about your smoking. Tell me about that.
oh yeah, I started smoking when I was 16 years old. And I quit for a couple of years. And that nervousness came back, so I started smoking once I got into Southeast Asia. I quit smoking cold turkey in 94. So I quit smoking in 94, and it wasn't discovered until 2019. I'm not sure what happened, but I think because of the smoking and possible agent element, and I'm not going to say possible, because I am presumptive. And for 3 locations that I was at, presumptive for 3 illnesses that have caused cancer.
Yeah. So if you all will join me in congratulating and acknowledging the perseverance of our hero, our veteran, our cancer survivor, Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, awesome. Master Sergeant, thank you so very much. You did an awesome job of presenting that, a veteran. Let's run it forward. Thank you again so much for what you do for our people as well.
Okay. Got it. I got the chair.
And to our online viewers, if you have anything you'd like to ask us, put that in the chat for us, and we'll make sure that we try to answer that today. We want to bring up now our next speaker. Is going to be Dr. Eric Renaud. He's the Chief Director of Pulmonary and Critical Care and Interventional Pulmonary Medicine at Grady Hospital. As we were walking in today, we were talking to Dean West, and he said that there was a exposure in this community because of our landfills. And I'm pretty sure that Dr. Renaud is going to cover that. We talked about what we had to do to make sure that we educate the community about landfills and radon and so those kind of things. But we want to welcome our great doctor, Dr. Renaud, as he presents for small cell lung cancer. Give him a hand if you come this morning.
Thank you. All right. Thank you guys for coming out, and thank you guys who are online. I appreciate you coming out today. I'm going to walk around so I can stay a little bit free and a little bit cooler. But I do want to say that in this next few minutes, I have a big challenge. And what my challenge is I have to go through exactly what lung cancer is, what some of the risk factors are, and why it's impactful for our patient communication or our community. So I'm going to run through a lot of this pretty quick. You're going to get a crash course, but I hope I think it's always important for people to understand what exactly we're talking about, what the impacts are, because I don't really think that we can change some of these differences in healthcare, some of these disparities in healthcare without health education. Okay, so with that, I'll get started. Let's see, I think I will. No? You can childproof, but in the meantime, I'll just go. Is it off? One second. Got it. That worked. Good. All right. Perfect. Good. Okay. Thank you. All right. It was childproof. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to tell you exactly what lung cancer is, and able to do something. I just want to give you a general understanding of what cancer is. So one of the misconceptions about cancer is people think that it can be spread from one person to another. It just kind of develops. What cancer is you have this one little cell here that's your normal cell. That cell can be a breast cell, it can be a prostate cell, it can be a colon cell. In this case, it's a lung cell. And for some reason, it changes. For some reason, there's a genetic change in that code which makes it just start growing. And it grows out of control. Doesn't know when to stop. And it grows from 1 cell to 2 cells. It goes from 2 cells to 4 cells, 4 to 8. And then you get a group of them, and that's your cancer. And when it starts overgrowing and taking over other organs of the body, it starts depleting them of their food, their nutrition, their space, and their function. And so that's what cancer is. With the lung very specifically, there's 2 major types. Now, I have to confess that in the medical field, we're not really good about naming things. But I'm going to give you a general understanding about the 2 major types. One of them, the cells are actually in each one of these little blue dots. that's one of the cells. One of those is small cells, and you'll see that they're really small, they're really blue, they're really compact in, and this type is actually the one that's cause a lot more damage, and that's the purpose of our discussion today, because it grows extremely fast and it spreads extremely fast. And it has the strongest link of all the cancers in the lung to smoking. Okay. The other one is not so small. You can see the cells are bigger, they grow slower, there's more other causes, but smoking's still number one, and we call that non-small cell, right? So we didn't get too creative about this, but that's the two important parts. Knowing that the small cell one is the rapid spreading one that actually causes a lot of damage, and I'll tell you why that's important earlier. But when we think about the causes, we know that of all the lung cancers, about 95% of them are related to smoking, okay? There are other things related to it, but 95% are related to smoking. Number 2 in the US is radon, okay? Very many of you familiar with radon? So what radon is, it is a breakdown product of uranium, and it's in the soil and it's released. It doesn't have a color, it doesn't have a taste, it doesn't have a smell. It's radiation that comes up. It's so bad in the area of the country, in Georgia where we live, that if you sell your house, it has to be tested ahead of time, okay? When we look at here for Texas specifically, of all the radon tests that are done here, about 8%, 7.7, about 8% of them are above the Environmental Protection Agency's limit for that, which means there's still some exposure coming up, but 8% of them are above that level. Then you have other things. You have like asbestos. It's a fiber that, you know, it was an insulation and car brakes and whatever else. It doesn't break down in the lungs. Now, if you're ever up late watching television, you'll hear them talk about, oh, mesothelioma and asbestos exposure. The mesothelioma is another cancer that grows along the lining of the chest, and it actually encompasses and chokes off the lungs, right? If you have mesothelioma, we know you were exposed to asbestos. However, if you were exposed to asbestos, the cancer you're most likely to get is lung cancer. Okay? And then there's pollution. We heard about, I've heard recently that you have landfills. They were trying to expand that. I think that's good that they stopped that. Okay? Chemical factories, and even just having lungs, because there's a large percentage of people that we're starting to see, especially women that have never smoked, that are developing lung cancer. And this is a recent thing that came out from the American Cancer Society. Okay. But specifically, and I know there's a lot of veterans here in Texas. I know one personally, right? And that there's a lot that wasn't said or wasn't very familiar, that you have to have this knowledge about these potential exposures and what risks they do play. One of them is definitely smoking. And it's interesting, when you look at the data, especially for veterans that were actively serving, about 32% of them smoke, right? And of those that are retired, because many have quit, 20% of them still smoke. And if you were deployed overseas during conflict, about 50% of them were smoking. And the reason, one of the reasons why, is part of the rations that were provided, a lot of cigarettes were free, if not very discounted, okay? Agent Orange, okay? And then recently we've heard about the burn pits, where they were burning all types of stuff, just getting rid of it. The chemicals, the breakdown from the chemical weapons was down, and get these huge plumes that would just go all the way across cities and just encompass cities, okay? And all of these are big relationship to developing lung cancer. And the important thing to know about this, when I talk about all the other things that are related to it, it's not that they're additive, they're multiplicative. So, if you smoke, you have a 10 times the likelihood of developing lung cancer. If you're exposed to asbestos, it's 6 times. If you're exposed to asbestos and you smoke, it jumps up to 60 times. That's how it works. So knowing these things about your history, reporting them back to your physician so they can put all this together and find out what risk you have is very important. Okay. So let's get now a little bit more closer to where we're here. How and why is lung cancer bad for blacks? Okay. So when we talk about these differences in healthcare, these disparities, a long time when we broke this down, I was thinking about this and said, okay, part of it is health, right? Part of it's health, and when we talk about health, we have to talk about the environmental factors that play a role, where you live, what you're exposed to, your habits, what you do, smoking is being one of those. And the other thing is your biology, okay? Because not every group of people, not every socioeconomic group, not every racial group has the same biology. And different things affect different groups in different ways. The other is healthcare, okay? Because if you start thinking about healthcare, you gotta think about, well, what about detecting early cancer? And do we have the opportunity to detect cancer early? And then the other systemic factors, if they do find something, do you have the opportunity to get the treatment you need in a timely fashion? Okay. So I moved away from healthcare disparities being all about race and racial discrimination, and yes, there's some that still exist, to breaking it down into these two factors of health and healthcare. So let's talk about a couple. All right. So what do we know about blacks in America and lung cancer? Well, they have the highest death rates despite smoking the same amount. And that's really important, right? That should tell you something. Okay? They're less likely to get screened. They are diagnosed at later stages because they're not getting screened. They're less likely to have any treatment at all for lung cancer. So, give you an idea of what we're talking about. So this are the lung cancer statistics that they expect specifically for African Americans during this year coming, okay? So on this top level here, you're gonna have the estimated new cases that you expect to see this year, okay? And they're looking at all types of cancer for African American men and African American women. And on the bottom, they're estimating what the death rates are gonna be for each of those groups. So if we take number 1 for men, prostate cancer, and number 1 for women is breast cancer. But what you're gonna notice is number 2 is lung, and number 2 is lung for female in both groups. But the numbers are different, okay? There's almost 3 times as much prostate cancer that they expect to see this year in men, right? But if you take a look at what's the number 1 killer of the cancers, lung is number 1. So that's telling you something. Either it is more aggressive, or treatment's not as readily available, or being received, or a combination thereof. Same thing for women. 3 times as much breast cancer in the US as lung. But now, when you look, they're about equal. Little bit off, there's about 500 off. Breast still stays number 1, but not by very much. So when you have 3 times as much, but the other one catches up, that tells you that it behaves differently in different groups. Okay? And so this is a graphic to show you exactly what this is and how this risk factor comes to play. So what I'm showing you here is the lung cancer incidence rates per 100,000 people. Okay? And I'm comparing it to the smoking prevalence rates in the different groups. You have African Americans at the top, whites, and then you have Native Americans and Alaskans at the bottom. And what you're looking at over here is you're looking at the smoking rates here. So African American men is in yellow, it's about 25. For women, 18%. White men and white women, about the same. So these numbers are not very different statistically. But if you look over here at the incidence rates across the US, you'll see it's different. There's almost a 10-point difference here in this risk. So this is telling you, remember we talked about equal smoking rates, but higher lung cancer rates with the population. So something else is actually playing a role. And if you really want to see an example of this, let's look at Native Americans and Alaskans, right? Look at the men. They're smoking almost twice as much, right? But there's significantly less lung cancer rates, right? So yes, biology does play a role, and we have to recognize these in order to make a difference in rates. So In Texas, y'all can smoke. Right? Here's the national average. It's about 13.5% of smokers in the United States. Here, about 13.1. It's not that good. It's not that different from the rest of the nation, but it's still pretty significant. But you don't need to have all the statistics to know that. When I got off the airport, I saw that. When I'm driving through the neighborhoods, we see the smoke shops and the hookah shops and everything else that comes through there. And so it is pretty significant here. And what I've learned after taking care of patients, especially in our community, is when I start asking about their smoking history, it's not how much do you smoke. It's not how long have you smoked. It's what do you smoke, right? Because we don't realize that what we smoke may not be the same. One cigarette is not the same as a cigar, as it's the same as everything else. And here's an example. So my problem with all this, and when we start thinking about the bad effects of smoking and tobacco, right? Everybody says nicotine, 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 right? Nicotine isn't necessarily the one thing that's causing the cancer. It's all the other 6,000 chemicals that are released from the burning substances that they put in there, right? Those are a lot of the cancer-causing agents. The nicotine is the addictive substance which keeps you coming back for more, okay? And it's downplayed, right? If nicotine were a new drug that were being produced now onto the market, the FDA would have a big problem with it. Because the only other two substances that are more addictive than nicotine is cocaine and heroin. That's how bad it is. But it's been part of culture. It's been part of economies for such a long time that it's kind of given a pass. But it is tightly regulated. So what that means is that in a cigarette, there's regulated about 8 milligrams of nicotine per cigarette, okay? When you start getting into these small cigars, it goes up significantly. I had a patient, he's a very young guy. He was proud of himself. He says, "Hey doc, look, I've cut back on smoking. I'm down to 1 or 2 a day." I said, 1 or 2 of what? He said, the Black and Milds. I said, you know the Black and Milds, that's 100 milligrams of nicotine? One Black and Milds small cigar is more than half a pack. It's 12.5 cigarettes equivalent. Okay? And for the people like, you see it, well, we're going to go to the cigar bar. We're going to have a cigar and then celebrate and everything, whatever else. That's 200 milligrams. That's the same as 25 cigarettes. Okay? And I don't think people realize exactly the amount of chemicals that goes into these things that they're being exposed to. Okay? Oh, you think about the marketing, right? Because we know that African American populations were highly targeted. There was in some of the communities, almost 10 times as much advertising for tobacco in their neighborhoods and communities than other communities, right? And if you don't believe me about this, just ask yourself, why did they name this Black and Mild? Okay. So, keeping on with the untold truths here about this, what the new craze now is, phase, whatever you want to call it, is the vaping, right? Especially in younger populations. Probably they feel like it's more socially acceptable and whatever else, but if you want to make the same type of comparisons, you take a pack of cigarettes, it's 20 cigarettes, okay? And if you want to make the comparison, okay, you take your 20 cigarettes and you take one of those jewel pods, right? And I've seen people, they'll go through like 2 or 3 jewel pods a day. That's the equivalent of 41 cigarettes, right? And they don't realize, you just see these big, huge flumes of smoke that they're blowing out, okay? And then you look at the puff bar ones, that's another one. And I really don't like these ones. I don't like these ones because they actually, flavored them with menthol. And I'm a very big proponent of getting rid of the menthol flavor. What menthol did is, because all of the toxins and stuff come in and they're irritants to people, that to get the irritants as they start smoking, to make it easier for them, they put the menthol in as a soothing component of it. They knew what they were doing, all right? And so then it makes it smoother, easier, long enough for you to get addicted to the nicotine and keep coming back. And then there's the new one. I've seen these Surun pods. These are chock full. These are chock full of nicotine. You're getting about 90 cigarettes worth when you go through one of those pods. And if you, again, we get back to the advertising and targeted advertising in different populations. And we're going to go back in history and you can see, like, you can date yourself back and you can see, and even the wording, okay, you're cool, bold, cold, Newports. And through time, they have kept up with the marketing, changing styles, 60s, 70s, 80s, and now we're starting to see what's happened in the 90s, 2000s now. Lately, these are the biggest things. And there's a whole campaign for this on how they market this and recommendations. You can go and read back the reporting on these trends from this, but they know what they're doing and they know who they're targeting. They know what to do. You're going to relax, you're just going to relax and get cancer, right? And this is across. This is even in Britain. They're targeting specific populations with smoking from that standpoint. And the hookah bars have become another thing. Okay, and this is really important to think about. It's because what happens, a lot of friends get together and they're going to go sit down in this bar that's filled with smoke and everybody's bad breath that's floating around there, and they're going to sit and they're going to pay for an hour session, and then you have this pot there and they pass this little straw thing around and they breathe it in, they smoke, and everybody goes and they have a good session, right? That's a lot of nicotine that you're getting because each person is getting about 200 puffs per session, which turns out to be about 100 cigarettes per person per session. That's 5 packs. Right. And you got young people who are doing this socially acceptable when their brains are still developing and the nicotine becomes ingrained and addictive, and it's harder for them to quit later. I don't even know where to start with this. And there's a whole campaign about legalizing marijuana, right? And I don't want to get into the whole legal aspects of it and whatever else, but in the past, we weren't really sure exactly how much marijuana contributed to the development of lung cancer because it wasn't measured. We couldn't measure it very well and equate everybody's usage and amount of usage to get. But now there's studies that have shown that a heavy marijuana user has a 2-fold risk of developing lung cancer in their lifetime. Okay, and this is a lifetime heavy user. So you want to know what heavy users are? 50 times in a lifetime. Yeah, I know. I got some patients that's 50 times a week, if not more, right? And so this is pretty significant because there's a big push to say this is going to be acceptable because it's legal and we're going to accept this in our homes, in our communities, in our environments, and we're actually doing our own selves in. Okay. So, we'll talk about screening because the only way to get ahead of this, the only way to get ahead of lung cancer, if you have the risk factors, is to get screened, right? And what the goal of screening is to catch lung cancer before you have symptoms, okay? Right, because we know by the time people have symptoms from lung cancer, about 3/4 of those patients have late, non-curable disease. Okay, but these symptoms of a cough, you're short of breath, you get treated for a pneumonia, you come back and they see everything's the same, and you get treated again and it's still there. You might need to look a little bit differently at it, or if you have pain in your chest, or you're just not breathing as well. And a lot of times these warning signs are played down, and if you just wait on those, if you should know your body and just pay attention to them and move forward to get checked on some of those. Okay? Because the whole goal of screening is to check and look for lung cancer when it's really small and before you have symptoms. And that's important because, and I'm going to give you, so we're going to go through, you're getting a whole course right now. So you're going to go, so this is a CAT scan of the lung. This is what normal lung looks like. And you see this little spot right there? That's an early lung cancer. The reason it's important to get screened is because along the edge of the lung, there's a lot of nerve fibers. You know, if someone breaks a rib, it's really painful for them. In the airways here, if something's bothering them, you cough. Yeah, but in the middle of the lung, there's no nerve fibers. So what happens is that early growing lung cancer goes undetected unless you start looking for it early. Okay? And we know that if you get screened, CAT scans are better, Just not, CAT scans are better than chest x-rays. They actually improve your likelihood of surviving if you catch it. And just getting screened should decrease somebody who's high risk. It decreases their likelihood of dying of lung cancer by 25%. So who should get screened? And these are the new criteria. There's newer criteria that's come out. It hasn't been picked up by Medicaid for coverage yet across the board, but it will come. But this is the current screening guidelines that we're actually using. If you are a smoker between the ages of 50 to 80 years old, if you have at least what we call a 20-pack year smoking history. So what does that mean? If you smoke 1 pack a day for 20 years, that's 20 pack years. 2 packs a day for 10 years, that's 20 pack years. If you're 20 pack years or above and you're within the age range and you smoke any time within the past 15 years, you should get screened. You will meet the qualifications for getting screened. Okay. So the challenge that we're having both in the healthcare professional field and on our own is getting people to get screened. Okay. The national average of people that we know are high risk that should be getting screened, that are actually getting screened, is only about 4.5%. Okay. In Texas, we need to do a little work here, right? Because you're only screening about 1.2%. Texas, you're less than Alabama, and that's saying a lot. No offense to Alabama. Right. So, and the importance of screening is because if you find it early, it can improve your survival. That's the best shot we have. If we look at how, just across the distribution, and this is the stage at diagnosis. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about when you're diagnosed, they're telling you what stage you are. How bad has the cancer spread? Okay? So when they say localized, it's in one spot. Okay? When they say regional, it might be in the lungs, but in some lymph nodes. But when they say distance, it has spread throughout most of the body, okay? Other parts of the body. And in this graph, we're comparing whites to blacks at the time of their stage of diagnosis, at the time that they were diagnosed. And you'll see that African Americans are less likely to have their lung cancer caught early. Mid stages, it's about equal, but they're more likely to be diagnosed at a late stage with their lung cancer, right? So it's important to know that getting screened, if you're a risk, will help you catch it early so you have a better chance for survival. So what's it like here in Texas? And what are some of these disparities? This is specifically for Texas here. Who's found at an earlier diagnosis? These are the darker color are whites, and the lighter blue is African Americans. And you can see African Americans here less likely to be diagnosed early. Now, the best would be, if you're diagnosed early, your best opportunity for treatment and survival, we heard this earlier, is to have surgery, to get it out, okay? In Texas, African Americans less likely to have surgery, almost 5% less, okay? And then to not even get any treatment, lack of any treatment at all for your lung cancer, African Americans are less likely to receive any treatment at all, right? So we have a lot of work to do. Okay. To understand why this is important, especially with the early stage and catching it early, you need to understand a little bit, and I'm going to get a little granular here, but you're going to understand this, okay? So we talked about the normal cell, and we talked about how it gets to change, and then all of a sudden it starts growing out of control. The rate at which it grows out of control tells you how aggressive the cancer is, okay? And we call that time from the time you go from 1 cell to 2 cells, from 2 cells to 4 cells. But think of it differently. Let's take, and they say, oh, your cancer's the size, maybe a teaspoon, okay? So by the time you go from teaspoon amount of cancer cells to 2 teaspoons is your doubling time, okay? It's doubled. And those 2 then are gonna go to 4. And before you know it, you're gonna have a cup worth, and then a pint worth, and then it's spread other places, okay? So for non-small cell, the slower growing one, that doubling time is about 2 to 3 months. So when someone's diagnosed, you're on the ticking time clock to get all the studies you need to get your treatment going. Okay. And for the non-small cell, if you can catch it early, the best thing you can do is get the surgery and get it out of the body. If not, then there can add in some chemotherapy or radiation therapy or combination thereof. We heard about that earlier, and there's new treatments for targeted therapy that you'll probably hear about a little bit later. Okay. Here's the problem. In Texas, the number of patients, the percentage of patients that actually get treated with surgery is one of the worst in the nation. For some reason, they're not getting to surgery. And let's go back. That's all populations here. And remember, I told you right here that the surgical treatment for African Americans was significantly less. So that number is even lower for African Americans. Okay. And which group inside of African Americans needs the most help? If we compare, so what they're looking at, I cut off here, I'm sorry about that. We're looking at patients who were diagnosed with that early stage. Those that had the best opportunity for getting curative surgery. And that's stage 1. And who actually got the surgery? This is white men, black men, white women, black women. Everybody else is in the 90s except men. Right? And so this is our target population we need to see, because we're missing an opportunity. For small cell, this is worse. This is the most aggressive one. You're going to hear a little bit more about this. But this doubling time, from the time you go from that 1 teaspoon to 2 teaspoons, 30 days, 1 month. When I diagnose someone with small cell lung cancer, I am moving, let's get their scans, let's get them started on treatment, get to the oncologist so we can move things earlier. Because this one is small, it spreads fast, and it doubles fast. Okay? And you can see that because it's so fast moving, surgery is never really the primary option for the treatment of it. Okay? And the treatment options are decided on whether it is limited, which means it would only be in one part of the chest. Here's the right lung, here's the left lung, and this is the PET scan, and that's the spot. Or whether or not it has spread beyond where you have extensive stage. Okay? Treatment, classic treatment has been dependent upon the stage, but it's either chemotherapy or radiation or a combination thereof. But even with this, because it is the most aggressive, only about 5 to 10% are still alive in 5 years. Survival, if you have extensive stage, you're about 6 to 12 months survival, even with therapy. With therapy at 2 years, only about 10%, only about 10% are still alive. But there's new opportunities in therapies. Got it? Okay, good. All right. The thing about that with some of these newer treatments, go back here. There's newer treatments on the horizon, some immunotherapy, you'll hear about that. A new drug, tarlatamab, which shows promises, trying to help your immune system recognize and treat better. Okay. The thing about clinical trials, especially with African Americans, is we have not been in very many clinical trials. I know there's some bad history, right? And there's some lack of trust with clinical trials. I can tell you the way clinical trials are done now, they're safe. Safety is a primary thing. It's no longer an experimentation where you're going to be getting a sugar pill or you're going to get some placebo sort of effect from that standpoint. When they're comparing these treatments, you're either going to get compared to the new treatment, which has already been tested for safety, or the standard treatment. So there's always the opportunity to get some sort of medical care, even for those who might be underinsured. Right? Then it also gives us an understanding of how these treatments work in African Americans. Okay? Because what happens is when we are not part of studies, when 83% of the people participating in study are white and only 6% are African Americans, all the results, all the data is geared towards not African Americans. I got you, Howard. So I'm going to summarize up because I've run a little bit over. Okay. I can't talk anymore without mentioning something about prevention. But because if we look at the rates of tobacco use, and these are middle schoolers that are done, somewhere between 4 to 5%, and middle schoolers are already starting to use tobacco products. Okay, and in the past, where the boy used to be the problem, now it's the girls. But the biggest thing we have to recognize is that we can't teach our kids not to do something if they see us doing something. Okay? I want you to remember the screening criteria. Right? And if you know somebody or you yourself is a candidate to get screened, I'd encourage you to get screened. And remember, participating in clinical trials. You get opportunities for new treatment. We learn more about how to treat black people. And we can, even those that may not have medical coverage care, you get some sort of care and it could improve your life. And with that, thanks. Sorry, I ran over.
Thank you, Dr. Bruno. He's at home in Texas, so I kind of let him run over. He's in Dallas, so I had to go listen a little longer than home, but that was wonderful. During our call, we'll answer any questions, and hopefully we'll talk about the screening again, how many times you can screen, also the stages, and so we'll get to that as well, and make sure that we cover that in the call to action. So we're going to move right along. I think that our next speaker is Dr. Couture. He's the hematologist and medical oncologist first for Texas Oncology, and he'll be speaking with us today also about small cell lung cancer, the treatment and advances in small cell lung cancer. Would you give Dr. Couture a hand as he comes this morning?
Good morning, all. Thank you for the organizers to have me over. I am a medical oncologist with a bent of research and work interest in thoracic lung cancers, and I was tasked to talk a little bit about small cell lung cancer and the ongoing research considerations. It's something that it needs a lot of impetus and a lot of work that still needs to be done. But like the last speaker, I will just kind of go over a little bit of the background on lung cancer. And as was alluded to, if you remove the squamous cell and basal cell skin cancers that are very prolific in our distribution of patients, if you remove that, lung cancer in men and women establishes a second number of patients who are diagnosed with lung cancer in the United States, both in men and then in women. But unfortunately, if you look at the number of new cancer deaths in the US, lung cancer deaths is the highest in both men and women, and by far outranks, if you just add up the two next incidences of deaths in men, and then again somewhere in that same range in women. Unfortunately, lung cancer outranks those by far and beyond. So what are we doing in these considerations will need to depend upon what we understand about where we are in terms of lung cancer considerations. Well, we have some level of a silver lining, that you can see that the rates of lung cancer, for example, the total death rates in males climbed somewhere till this point of time. Cigarette smoking cessation measures, as well as public awareness of cigarette smoking, etc., started coming up a couple of decades ago, and then as the incidence of cigarette smoking sort of cut back in the communities, you can see a nice drop. Although, of course, if you see that there's a big gap between the number of lung cancer deaths in men in the lung and bronchus groups in comparison to all the others, which seem to be obviously on the lower end. They are not to be belittled. These death rates are high, but obviously we're today talking about lung cancer, and if you look at the comparators, that's the consideration. In women, there was also a rise as similar, obviously a little lower, perhaps the cigarette smoking rates were lesser, obviously, and therefore that number. There's also a big understanding that we do not have at this point of time in terms of the genetic considerations for why lung cancers occur in men, women, different ethnicities, etc. And this is the trend of death of lung cancer deaths in women. Again, as you can see, there is a gap between that and the next most common death incidence, which is in breast cancer. So we do see an improvement over the last 20 years. I've been working in this field for nearly 27 years, and we clearly have seen advances over a period of time, and that has certainly helped improve outcomes. But as was just pointed out, lung cancer screening is helping, awareness is helping, and death rates are definitely on the downward trend. Okay, something I'm doing is wrong, I guess. All right. Sorry? I have to stand close by? Is that what it is? Oh, okay. All right. I couldn't see it this way, so I came that way. All right. That's not working either. Sorry for the glitch. So anyway, while he's helping put it back up, small cell lung cancer is a smaller proportion of tumors that comprise lung cancer in the United States or also, of course, the world. In majority of the circumstances, we are talking about non-small cell lung cancer. But can I go back and stand? Oh, okay, thank you. So if one looks at cancer incidences, it has already been pointed out very well by the prior speaker. You can see the cancer incidences in terms of ethnicities, and you can see significant numbers of differences in between African Americans, Native Americans, and Asian American Pacific Islanders in comparison. So it's just a matter of understanding how ethnicities play a role in terms of what might be driving cancer considerations. Okay. Death rates by ethnicity, you can see African Americans unfortunately also have higher death rates in males if one looks at it. Similarly, one can also see this in Native American populations in comparison to the other baseline considerations. Lung cancer incidence and mortality. Incidence is the number of new cases or the cases that you're picking up. Mortality is the number of deaths that are occurring, and they have just taken into account a 5-year span and shown this. One looks at it again, male, the African American disparities you can see somewhat in the male populations. Something similarly, you can see mortality rates being on the high side in terms of the general consideration of the overall lung cancer incidences and mortality. All right. Once again, in a different way, if one were to look at, we talk a lot about 5-year survival rates because it's been the standard or the gold standard of how to try to evaluate patients in terms of how they do. We feel like if they have done better over 5 years, that's a sort of a benchmark. So if you look at a 5-year relative survival by race, you can see in lung and bronchus, African Americans versus Caucasian populations, and you can see the differences in terms of slight changes in terms of 5-year survival rates in the US over a period of a 6-year consideration for gathering of data. Obviously, this is not a surprise to anyone. The incidence of deaths per mortality rates by county in the United States with lung cancer mortality, obviously the darker the color is, the more higher the incidence, and it's mostly in the region sort of where tobacco is significantly prevalent, significant use, production, and consumption. But it's not like it's less in certain counties in other parts of the country as well. These are trends in lung cancer incidence rates. Again, if you see of lung cancer incidence, all races and ethnicities, you can see that it's dropping as we talked about. But the drops, as you can see out here, these are for white individuals, and distant, regional, local, and unstaged. What that means is, per stage of disease, whether the stage is localized or whether the stage is advanced, what are the kind of rates that you can see. And you can see the distant disease, which is disease which has spread out, and what generally we would correlate that is with metastatic disease. In African American individuals, you can see the numbers are kind of on the higher side when you compare it to all races and ethnicities out here. If you look at it by terms of males and females, and one looks at African Americans as well as in the male population and the female populations, you can see the numbers are fairly on the high side. So there's a to a certain extent, there's a disproportionality in the consideration of lung cancer mortality rates. This was pointed out by the prior speaker. Now to talk about what I'm supposed to talk about is small cell lung cancer. Small cell lung cancer, as I was saying, compromises a small proportion of the large pie of lung cancers, the majority of which are non-small cell lung cancers, and those non-small cell lung cancers are broken down into various subtypes. But when one looks at it, small cell lung cancers in males and females is in the United States comprises approximately, let's say, a close 15% of what we diagnose in terms of the overall number of lung cancers in the United States. And one looks at the National Cancer Database, when you see the age distribution, small cell lung cancer is generally a disease of the middle and the later ages of life. And you can see it's in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that you see a peak incidences of this disease. It's very uncommon for younger populations to have it. So it's a high-grade neuroendocrine cancer with metastatic potential. It arises from neuroendocrine cells. These are cells that line on the respiratory tract and other areas of the body, but primarily in the respiratory tract. They are primarily associated with cigarette smoking, although 1 to 2% of cases can be seen in non-smokers as well, but by way and beyond the largest incidences is accounted by for cigarette smoking or the companion insults that come from cigarette smoking and other things like that. It accounts for 13%, I said 15%, okay, of lung cancers, approximately 31,000 cases that were diagnosed in 2022, and a 3-year relative mortality of approximately 10%. Mortality has declined, and that is not necessarily because we've made fantastic progress in lung cancer treatment. It's not because of that, but it's because of the incidence of lung cancer has started declining, as I showed you in the prior graphs, and so we are seeing an improvement. But we have a long ways to go in terms of how to treat small cell lung cancer populations. As I said, it arises in the lining of the respiratory tract. It gets these small cells, which are neuroendocrine cells, take off. And as the prior speaker talked about, these are aggressive cancers. They can grow rapidly and spread rapidly overall. Okay, the natural history of small cell lung cancer, as I just talked about and was mentioned by the prior speaker, is that it is distinguished from non-small cell lung cancer because of its rapid doubling time, a high growth fraction. And it spreads relatively faster than what you expect from other types of lung cancers, as particularly non-small cell lung cancers. Although considered highly responsive, we have this feeling that initially when you do the treatments for patients who have small cell lung cancers, these tumors shrink, they get better, but unfortunately, they usually relapse within the first few years of life. First few years of diagnosis. And overall, only 3 to 8% of patients with small cell lung cancer, that includes limited stage diseases, a slightly higher number. We'll talk about what staging means. That's a very few proportion of them survive beyond 5 years. Limited stage means something which is localized to one section of the chest. I can go into the details as necessary, but one section of the chest, it's localized, it's treated in a slightly different way in comparison to extensive stage, which means it has spread out. 1 out of 3 people with limited stage have limited stage when they are diagnosed, and 2 out of 3, which is the majority, have extensive stage. If it only spreads in certain sections of the lung, one part of the lung, some lymph nodes on the same side of the chest. And there used to be an old way of trying to say what is limited stage, when a radiation oncologist is able to draw a relatively consolidated single map of a field around the treatment burden, then it's what was considered as limited stage. But it's confined to an area essentially, and generally we give chemotherapy and radiation. PCI is prophylactic cranial radiation. That's a different treatment, and I can explain about that later. If it's widespread disease, usually the treatment is chemotherapy, but there have been some advances that have happened. Particularly just a few weeks ago, we had an advance that came out in limited stage small cell lung cancer, and now will become the standard of care for people who have limited stage disease after they have taken chemotherapy and radiation. I'll just talk about that in a second. So as was mentioned, if you can talk about it as stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, but as I said, for practicality purposes, it's a limited stage and extensive stage consideration. Limited stage being confined to one section of the chest or the lymph nodes, and extensive stage being disease that has spread out in minimal terms. So limited stage disease is, it can be safely treated with radiation and chemotherapy. It corresponds to stage 1 to 3. There's a type of staging called TNM, which is what we use for all types of malignancies. It stands for what is denoting the type of size or spread of the tumor. The same thing in terms of the lymph nodes, that's N, and then M stands for metastases, whether there are or there are not metastases present. And as we just talked about treatment, the issue about prophylactic cranial radiation has come under a little bit of discussion. There has been debate that there has been an improvement in terms of outcomes, but there's also a lot of side effects that come from prophylactic cranial radiation. The average or the median survival is about 28 to 30 months. And in extensive stage disease, it's considered a stage 4 disease. As we talked about, the disease is spread out. The current treatment as it stands is chemotherapy with immunotherapy. The median overall survival is about 12 months, which means if you treat 100 people, on an average, 50 of them will survive at approximately 12 months. The prognosis for 5 years, if you watch them over for 5 years, unfortunately is dismal. It's at 3%. Okay, talking about research, which is what I'm supposed to talk about, we have struggled, as I talked about, over a period of time for small cell. Why? Well, as I said, initially when you treat it, it responds very well, but unfortunately when you leave it be, it starts relapsing, and then unfortunately it progresses very quickly. The considerations are that there is no one particular target, but we are sort of starting to look at molecular signatures, which means genetic signatures in these tumors. This is still not for utilization for our patients on a day-to-day basis in our clinics, but we are seeing certain different signatures which make a distinction in terms of how we can sort of look at these patients and maybe then target certain therapies based upon the signature type. This is still a research-based consideration. It's still being evaluated, but it is something that has a promising concept, and therefore maybe, just maybe, will be something that we will start using in the future when we start seeing our patients with small cell lung cancer. So much discussion has been had about immunotherapy. Technically, what immunotherapy is in this, there are different types of immunotherapy drugs, but you might have, or people who have disease with this particular kind of malignancy have heard about what is called PD-L1 therapy. PD-L1 is a checkpoint inhibitor. It checks the tumor, produces this checkpoint, and it blocks the innate immune T cells of the patient's body from coming and attacking the tumor. So that's the block, which is the PD-1. On PD-L1 is the ligand, which is on the side of the tumor. PD-1 is the signal that comes and connects to it and blocks it. Well, so tumor cells are producing this block. They cause these to become inactive T cells. Immune system can't recognize these tumors. These tumors tend to grow, and therefore they become active. A major breakthrough in oncology, not just in small cell lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, and many other types of malignancies, has been the utilization of immunotherapy with immune checkpoint inhibitors, where these medicines come in and sort of remove that block. So it does not allow the tumor, the tumor producing the block does not allow that block to take place, and now the T cell is free to initiate its activity, recognize the tumor, come in and hit the tumor, and now these are active T cells causing cell tumor death. So it has become a major play in terms of lung cancer, and in small cell lung cancer also it has been shown to be active in extensive stage disease. What has now been shown in limited stage disease a few weeks ago is that after taking chemotherapy and radiation, if you bring that same immunotherapy like drug up front into the limited stage patients, they are seeming to have a very clear evidence of a improvement in overall survival. And there are technical terms that we can talk about, what is overall survival, progression-free survival, etc. But basically, it is doing a great job. We expect that this will become standard of care within a matter of a very short period of time, and therefore was a big advance in terms of limited stage disease because the outcomes were very significant. Another kind of consideration for treatment, which the prior speaker talked about, is a drug called tarlatamab. It is a class of drugs called BiTE, and these involve bispecific T cell engagers. And what that is the T cell, we talked about how the T cell can come and recognize when the block is removed. Well, these actually bring the T cells across and attach to a particular antigen called DLL3, and these T cells can now, because they are in close proximity and have been linked to the tumor cells, they are on one side a linker which is bispecific, it goes both ways. On one side there is a T cell attachment, on the other side it's a tumor attachment, and when these T cells come close to each other, these T cells are able to hit the tumor cells, and apoptosis is death of the tumors. There are a whole bunch of small cell lung cancer initiatives that are going on. These include various enzymes that are being assessed. There's different types of radiations that are being assessed. There are drugs called antibody drug conjugates that are being assessed, and they are in assessment over a period of time, and we will wait to see over the next few years what else happens. But in the recent past, these are the two large determinants of improvements in outcomes for patients who have small cell lung cancer. And so in conclusion, it's an aggressive type of lung cancer, and it responds to chemo initially, but unfortunately progresses. There are newer means of treatments in the last few years, as I talked about, and with cigarette cessation and screening, there is hope to further reduce, bring that curve down further in new cases of lung cancer. And therefore, the beseeching request is to go get yourself tested, participate in treatment, participate in clinical trials, etc., so that we can help produce a improvement in the curves, prevent the disease, and maybe improve outcomes for patients who have unfortunately already been diagnosed with this malignancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Good. Thank you very much. Well, it was much time so people about to know about background without call to action. Maxwell, Cassandra Green, she's my family nurse navigator here in the Texas area. And I'm gonna kind of sit with you for just a minute. Give her a hand as she comes in the morning. And they told me you were a navigator. And what does a navigator do? Because I need transportation.
So, as an oncology nurse navigator, my main job is to address any barriers to care my patient may have. So, when I go in and I meet this patient on consult, usually on consult, sometimes I call them before they get there, but I like a personal face-to-face meeting because patients remember you better that way. I tell them my job is to address a barrier, any barriers you may have that's going to keep you from starting, continuing, and completing your cancer care. Barriers, it could be transportation, financial issues, emotional issues, psychosocial issues, nutritional issues. My job is to address those. And so when they're coming to me, I'm sitting there, I'm asking them questions. I've kind of reviewed their chart before I go see them, so I know this patient has a history of non-compliance. So that means that somebody I'm gonna have to follow very closely because they're not going to probably follow our recommended regimen. This patient is uninsured, underfunded, so I'm gonna need to start working with my financial navigator to see what programs are available to get them to get their treatment. I'm going to see if they've had this is a new diagnosis for them, and most of the time it is. How are they dealing with it? When I'm talking with them, I'm seeing they're crying, they're upset, or they're very standoffish, stone-faced. That means they're not processing anything that I'm saying.
Suppose the patient now, and I have the information, my physician provider is giving me all my information. I can't afford the medicine, but I understand Amgen has some new pharmaceutical drug that I might be able to use.
And so I'm going to let them know that if they qualify for that medication, we have to look at the tumor type they have, and the physician's going to decide what medication is the best regimen for you. Yes, you've seen the commercials for all the drugs. We've all seen the drug commercials on TV, but that may not be what's best for your type of cancer. And once the doctor recommends something, we have a financial navigator that I work with that's going to go with and look to the Amgen funding, what kind of programs they have available. Not just that, but we're also going to look for what grants are available in the community that can help this patient.
Well, I went to this provider, and he's my provider, and the doctor, he's been pretty good, but he's not listening to me right now. I haven't been able to take anybody to the doctor with me. And I just don't believe this provider is doing what they should be doing for me as a patient. Is there anything you can do for me to help me with a new provider, anything you can help me with?
So one of the main things I tell my patient when I come and see them is that I work for you, I don't work for the physician. I'm employed by the hospital, not by the physicians, and my job is to advocate for you. So if you don't agree with what the doctor is saying, and you feel like the doctor's not listening to you, let me know, because I'm gonna have the conversation with the physician for you. So, and I always tell them, the physician's gonna be mad at me, but in about 10, 15 minutes, he's gonna need me to help him with another patient, so he gets over it pretty quickly, because he's gonna need me to solve something for him. But also, I always tell the patient, when they have questions, I am your single point of contact as your nurse navigator. I am going to be taking care of you from diagnosis until 5 to 6 years after you have completed treatment. Or if you're on maintenance treatment infinitely, I will be there to take care of you. And so my job is to be your advocate, make sure what you want. And a lot of times it's about being an advocate toward their family, because what the patient wants is very different than what their family wants.
I heard a veteran master sergeant told me this morning that nutrition is very important. And I'm not eating well. As a matter of fact, I can't hardly go to the store and get what I need, those fruits and vegetables, those colorful things I need for my diet. How can you guys help me as a navigator?
As a navigator, I'm going to put you in contact with my dietitian, but one of the things we have in Houston is that we have a program for the Houston Food Bank where they will deliver a box of food to your house to give you some of those things. I also we work well with a big grocery store chain in our community. HEB is very good about giving us things and donating things and bringing things to our cancer patient and our cancer center. And it also with transportation, believe it or not, in Harris County, Houston, Texas, only 17% of blacks have access to a vehicle. And a huge city that is driven mostly by vehicles because we're so spread out. We're like 640 square miles. So, and if you live in the suburbs of Houston or a community, even though you're in the city limits, you may not have access. The buses don't run everywhere. So I've got to figure out how to get patients back and forth. What am I looking for? How to get you back and forth to treatment? Because chemo may be once a week, but radiation is every day for 5 days a week. So for 6 weeks sometimes. So those are the things that your navigator should be doing for you. Taking the headache out of your treatment. So you have questions, you have multiple physicians working with you. You have your medical oncologist, you've got your radiation oncologist, your surgical oncologist, and on top of your cardiologist and your primary care. And I have this question, what's more frustrating for a patient than to say, I have a question, and you call one office and they say, well, that's not us, you need to call somebody else. I tell the patient, don't make all those phone calls, just call me, because 95% of the time it's come up before and I know the answer, and if not, I make the phone calls for you and call you back.
Okay, I just moved from Atlanta to Dallas, and I want to be here 6 months. The provider that you found for me is awesome. He's done a great job. As a matter of fact, he's going to try to keep me in his practice. But guess what? I know nobody here in the Dallas area, and I'm going from stage 2 small cell lung cancer. Are there any support groups here that you can help me with as a navigator to make sure that I got the pharmaceutical company Amgen helping me? I've got good providers giving to me, but now I don't know anybody. What support groups can you help me with?
So I'm going to put you in contact with all the local support groups, because as a navigator, you know all the local support groups. So there's a wonderful organization. It's a national organization, but they have local support groups called CanCare. And the wonderful thing about CanCare is that they have an online support group that's nationally. They have one for new diagnosed, they have one for caregivers, which is rare because we forget about caregivers in the cancer continuum. Caregivers are just as important as the patients. And then they have one for the stage 4. But one of the unique things about CanCare is they have one-on-one support. They will pair you with a cancer survivor that has the same type of cancer that you have to call you and can come and have a cup of coffee with you and talk to you to give you that one-on-one support, because they know exactly what you're going through. I tell the patients I can sympathize for you and I can empathize with you, but I don't know what you're going through because I've never had cancer. And there's something in value when you talk to someone who's actually gone through the journey that you've gone through, that they can relate to you on that particular level.
You've been very helpful to me as a patient, so I'm about to leave, but I'm probably going to need a nurse or somebody to come out of the house every now and then. I got my pharmacist to come and actually help me. You told me a great provider. He's doing a great job. Thank you for the nutrition that I was in the store, but I may not be able to make it out of the house. Is there someone that can come see me every other day or call me or something?
So we can set up home health, or we can help get that set up. I can also have on my list to call you once a week and make sure you're good. And if I need to make a visit, some navigators do go out in the community and make visits. We have community navigators. That's their job to go out and make sure the patient is doing well and redirect them as we go. One of the main things that can really help with that, and what all patients should get that have a cancer diagnosis, is palliative care. I have an awesome palliative care team that works on my outpatient side as well as the inpatient side. And they have an agency that they work with that once our cancer patients are in the outpatient setting, they're having palliative care visits at their house to help address all their needs. Palliative care and hospice get a bad name. Hospice is completely different from palliative care. And palliative care's job is to help manage your symptoms and to keep you out of the hospital and home as much as possible. And that's what so the navigators and the palliative care team, we tag team to make sure that patient is getting everything they need so that they can be comfortable in their home and get the treatment they need.
And lastly, I forgot to tell you, I'm a veteran too. So is there anything you can do when you have a big hospital or if there's anything I should be doing or you have any help over there?
I can. So the wonderful thing about navigators is that we talk. We all know each other. We're a small community. Navigation is up and coming. And so just the FYI, navigation was started in Harlem, New York by a physician who found that his African American breast patients weren't having as best outcomes as possible, and he kind of implemented nurse navigation. And so that's where we've grown. We're a small group, but we are a tight group. We lean on each other for resources. I have navigators from the VA say, I'm transferring my patient to you. This is what it is. I can reach out to them, and the same thing. I don't work for the major cancer center in Houston, but I work for another one, and we all talk. All the navigators in Houston talk. We meet once a month so that we can talk and share resources and how to get in contact with each other, because at the end of the day, it's about taking care of the patient, and that's what's most important.
As we prepare for our call to action, if you have something to tell our audience today as a navigator, I'm going to ask all our presenters to come down front, Dr. Drury and Dr. Young, she's going to join us. If you have to say something as a navigator to a patient that's going through some of the reenactments that you and I just did, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to stay focused, and if you need anything, call me. I'm here for you. And sometimes I've had patients, and I'll tell the story. I had a patient that called me at 2 o'clock in the morning one time on my office phone and left like a 15-minute voicemail. She was having a panic attack, a major panic attack, but she was scared to wake up her husband and her kids or anybody else in her family. So when I listened to the message, when I got to work the next morning, I called her and I said, oh, I'm so sorry. How are you feeling? She's like, oh, Cassandra, I feel 100% better. She was like, I was having a panic attack, but I just knew that I had your phone number and that you would listen, and I didn't have to bother anybody, and just knowing that you would listen made me feel like 100% better. And that made my day, because I was like, wow, I wasn't there, but I was there for her when she needed me. So I appreciated that, and she appreciated that.
Thank you, Sam. Let's get this out right here. Thank you so very much. Dr. Dewey and Dr. Fano, in your presentation, you talked about treatment options. You talked about chemotherapy, immunotherapy, and also targeted therapy. In a nutshell, for a novice, give us an idea what this is about. Those three types of therapies.
Sorry.
And always you can jump in anytime you want to, any questions. Online viewers as well.
Chemotherapy, so chemotherapy has been our long-standing backbone chemotherapy has been our long-standing backbone of treatment for a long time. So these are chemicals which have the ability to recognize certain parts of cell division or repair that normal cells go through. All of our cells go through this kind of a process, and what happens is when they are dividing or they are proliferating, some of these medicines come in and sort of in different sections of the molecule of the cell, they go in and sort of block those replicative functions. And since tumor cells are more actively proliferating, certain drugs in certain circumstances have the ability to block them. That's been our go-to treatment for like the last 60, 70 years. It has been used in all types of malignancies and has been used in non-small cell lung cancer. Where immunotherapy comes in is what I talked about. It's harnessing your own immune system to a certain extent to come and fight the cancer. There are different ways to do it. There are ways in which, as I said, removing the block that the cancers have as an ability to try to prevent the activity of the immune cells. So these medicines go and remove the block. There are ways to sort of bring the immune cells closer to the target, as I talked about in BiTE therapies. That therapy is now approved for small cell lung cancer at this point of time. Then there are considerations for treatment with taking your immune cells out, priming them, taking care of the immune system to not be affected, and then bringing back those immune cells and coming and fighting the cancer again. That means you've been able to prime the patient's own immune cells, taken them out of the body, made those targets, and then, made those molecules in which they're primed, and then put them back into the system. This is not yet being done in non-small cell lung cancer on the regular circumstance. It is something that is in clinical development, in clinical research. And that's why it's very important that we all push to encourage our patients to participate in research, because this is how the body of science moves forward. This is how we can get our treatments to. Targeted therapies, on the other hand, are seen in lung cancer and non-small cell lung cancer, and it is a poster child for how things work. There are many disease states in non-small cell lung cancer which are where one particular gene or certain particular genes are kind of affected. And now we have the ability to use the medicines that we can put against those genes. Either there's a mutation in the gene, or one part of a gene goes and attaches to another part of the gene, and then these tumor cells take off. So these targeted therapies recognize those particular changes in the genetic character of the tumor and come and fight it. So that's the sort of way.
Dr. Raymond?
Yeah, I think the targeted therapies, as it's been developing in I think there's about 35 new treatments or more out that are specific. And I think it's really important. A lot of us don't know that you can ask for this testing. The goal is to find a marker, like I mentioned, or a gene defect or an enhance your immune system, so that rather than the chemotherapy and the radiation therapy that was treated in the past with one size fits all, now they're looking at specific characteristics of your cancer to find out if there's a special therapy, a targeted therapy for your specific type. And I think that's been shown to improve people's survival and decrease their side effects.
if one looks at the lung cancer mortality curves that we just talked about and how they're dipping, a significant effect is based upon the benefits of immunotherapy and targeted therapy recently. Of course, we talk about the fact that cessation of cigarette smoking has helped significantly, right? I mean, there has been a drop in that, but nevertheless, these two advances have taken lung cancer from literally a disease in which nobody used to think anything but, oh my God, this is a bad situation, to a circumstance where we now have people who are clearly surviving 5 years beyond and doing well and being active in their communities and having a good quality of life. These medicines are helping.
Dr. When you talked about briefly your presentation about the lack of symptoms and all of a sudden the cancer is spread and we didn't know what was going on. All of a sudden now I got shoulders of breath, fatigue, I can't eat, pores. What's going on with the symptoms there? I have no symptoms. And all of a sudden it comes along.
I think what happens is, well, the first part, like I explained, like in the middle of the lung, you really don't know it's there, it's growing until it gets large enough to start causing problems. But it's on two parts. The other part that's happening is the second one where it sort of gets this head start, this sort of smooth, silent, attack. The other part of it is when somebody gets short of breath, what do? They slow down, right? They don't do as much. If something hurts, you don't do it as much. Rather than paying attention to why is this occurring to me right now, they kind of pull back. And then you feel a little bit more, you put it off, and then all of a sudden it's really bad. And that's when you're going. So that aspect of speaking with your providers, knowing about your body, and being aggressive and finding out about it and talking about it is really important.
Okay. And you talked about also in the presentation about the hookah bars and marijuana. There's quite a bit of legislation going around the country about supporting legislation to make sure that marijuana is approved and a legalized substance. Talk a little bit again about the hookah bars and marijuana and cancer.
It's really frustrating. It's really frustrating to have to talk about the legalization of marijuana. And I ask myself why, right? It does have addictive properties. It is mind-altering drug, and it has bad health effects from it. So the whole legalization is we're just allowing ourselves to do more damage to our bodies, and then we're having to pay the price later. And not just as the individual or the family or whatever else, but as a community as a whole. Even with smoking, it's legal, it doesn't have a big part if you're over 21. But if you think about the cost that it takes, not only on individuals and on families, even on economies. In Georgia, smoking, not Georgia, in Texas, your numbers in Texas, your smoking-related healthcare costs each year is about $8 billion. 28,000 people die each year of smoking-related causes, no matter what you're smoking. You take in each year from tobacco revenue about $1.7 billion from the taxes and everything. The state spends $6 million on prevention and cessation. And now we're going to push actually being allowed to smoke something else. Only a fraction. So we're just letting people smoke and taking in the money, but none of the money is going back to help the healthcare system, to help bring this down. So you're allowing people to do all this, and you're going to pay for it in the end. If you really want an example of a country that's suffering from that, you take a look at China. That the government took over the tobacco industry because it makes a huge portion, about 10% of their GDP is tobacco sales. And now since they have a universal health care problem, they're having to pay for the bad effects of it. So it's almost like driving with your brakes on.
Right. Mr. Green, question for you. How important is it for become involved in the policy and legislation part of our government. There's been a lot of biomarker bills passed around the United States. How important for people in Texas to be able to talk to your people, navigating, be involved themselves in the policy process?
So it's extremely important. We know that Texas is low in our healthcare rates, in our healthcare, in our state-funded insurance programs. We rank one of the last. And that healthcare we provide some of the most expensive healthcare with less access to it anywhere. We have the biggest medical center in the world, but yet we have the worst numbers when it comes to cancers and other diseases, which blows my mind. Like, people from all over the world come to Houston to get medical care because we got the biggest medical center, but yet Texas ranks the worst in healthcare. So it's important. There are things you can do. You need to speak to your, and I cannot stress this enough, start at the local level. These are people that you know. Your local politicians are the ones who see you mostly. They're living next door to you, they're living in your neighborhood. Their influence is more important than who's running for president. We have legislation right now that we're lobbying to, the oncology nurses are helping legislation with getting rid of menthol cigarettes, because we know that menthol cigarettes are aimed at the African American community. There's legislation for that. There's legislation right now also for moving oral oncolytics or oral chemotherapies from a prescription drug plan to your medical drug plan. A lot of you don't know this, but when you get chemotherapy, that's covered under your medical drug plan. But because the oral oncolytics are pills, they put them on the prescription drug plan, which is making these co-pays cost astronomical, and patients can't afford it. So we're trying to get legislation introduced where the oral oncolytics will be covered under medical insurance so that you can pay less. That's improving access to a lot of people. We also want to make sure that we're increasing oncology education. I went to nursing school and didn't learn anything about oncology. It's not taught in nursing school. Believe it or not, it's not taught in nursing school. If you want to learn about oncology, you have to specifically ask for that rotation. And that's why we don't have a lot of nurses and we don't have a lot of representation in oncology, because we're not exposed to it. So those are ways, and there can be policies. If you look at it, there's small things that we're doing locally also. Think of the changes we made when we got together as a public and demanded that our lawmakers say, you can't smoke indoors anymore. Everything needs to be non-smoking for those people who choose not to smoke, so that we can have healthy lungs. So our voices do have impact. That's why it's important that we're involved in policy.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Anything? None? Nobody? Yes, ma'am. Ma'am? Once we get to the mic, one second. Just a number of these Freshman parent, Dr. Dewey, how often should we get screened for lung cancer? Small cell lung cancer. How often?
I think it's on.
The screening is not for small or non-small. It's a lung cancer screening completely. As Dr. Fennell just talked about, it's a once-a-year screening for those people. There's a specific and a huge proportion of patients who have never smoked or have hardly smoked and will not follow the screening parameters. It's hard to understand that. But the by far and beyond, they have to have some numbers, they use some trials. Those were, as we talked about, in the 50s to 80 range for people who have a more than 25 years history of smoking. So those are those people who need to be evaluated, at least in that proportion of that population. We have the hope that it will have the biggest impact for improving lung cancer related mortality.
Hi, my name is Russell Thompson. I'm from Paul Quinn College. The question I have is, we have a group of students who are health and wellness majors. How do we get them to understand that there's a navigator that exists or that there are these health education opportunities as well as the typical medical opportunities where they can have a true direct impact. We've got some students who are interested in social work, but I never thought about it as a health educator and how all those tools can be effective.
So you can reach out in the Dallas area. There's going to be multiple organizations. There's going to be professional organizations, social work, nursing. There's going to be, I'm a nurse navigator, but there's also a group called patient navigators. They're non-clinical is what we call them, so they don't have a clinical background, but they help navigate patients. I would reach out to those professional organizations. Like I said, I'm a member of the Oncology Nursing Society. We invite students to our meeting every month when we meet. We invite them when we go to all the colleges and we say, hey, and if you reach out to them, they'll be glad to come to the colleges. We go to their career fairs, we go to their wellness events, so that we can get our name out there and let them know, hey, did you ever think about coming into oncology? And you know, oncology is not just for adults. We have pediatric, we have this, we have clinical research, navigation. There's many aspects. So I would reach out to your local professional organizations, and I know that they would be glad to come out and talk to your students.
I can add. The other thing is, another way you can sort of is stop by the tables out there. Because you have, yes, absolutely. And I don't work for the collaborative and partner with them, but I mean, look what's happened here. And then Amgen, another company which has come in and giving back to the community, they're here in person. And we've seen this across the nation from both of these groups, right? They're right out there, and there's an interest and a vested interest. So reaching out for these, even getting your foot in the door is good. So stop by their table. I need payment for that.
Howard, as he looks at Howard, okay. There's a question before we go to this.
Wait, just one more comment.
Sure.
For people or kids who are interested, college kids who are interested in medical considerations, there are programs across the hospital networks where you can shadow doctors, participate in research and stuff like that. Highly encourage that consideration, because if you set that up in those formative years, it just takes them into a different, orbit altogether. So there are circumstances where you can reach out, and in the larger hospital institutions, there are means and methods of being able to do that.
All right. I'm going to ask you guys for a closing remark, and then we'll talk a little bit about going quick Dr. Westhouse and close out. Howard, you have anything before I ask for a closing statement? And do you have anything you want to do? Good? Okay, all right. I need a closing statement from you guys as we encourage and engage our community in healthcare disparity, and also get information out to our community, enroll to our churches, to our schools, and to our other community facets. So we got to say something to them as they're walking out the door, as a navigator and as a physician. Tell us something that we can take home with us today.
The main thing I want you to take home today is the importance of lung cancer screening. It can save lives, and I will say I'm working on my doctorate, and my project is to improve lung cancer screening at my particular community hospital. But it's very important. My goal and my fingers crossed is for one day when we don't have all the restrictions on lung cancer as the guidelines as much as we do right now. I would like it to be like anyone that has smoked needs to get lung cancer screening. I would like to see that, but I think that's the important thing to take away is the importance of lung cancer screening.
I would probably say, like I said in one of the slides I had, it's a lot of the challenges, a lot of the disparities we have, it's not all of a just a race thing. There's several things that go into it. It's the health and the balance between health care and what we seek out, what we know about, what we're educated about, how we move our way through that and navigate through that. So I would say take control over those two aspects of it. Whether it's looking out for somebody else close to you and getting them into the system, reaching out to available studies, reaching out to physicians, navigators, anything. I would look at that and take control over your both your health and your healthcare system.
Dr. Blue?
So I'm a researcher and clinical provider for lung cancer. So deep for my heart is the consideration that research drives treatments and improvements and cures in the future. Hopefully, we have made a significant dent in lung cancer over the last 20 years. Started out, things were dismal and things have improved. And the one thing I would say is be aware of what is happening in lung cancer and participate wholeheartedly with patients and families to be involved in research, if possible, when and where it is possible, and or if it's not possible in your local community, to find out if there is a venue to participate in it around close or nearby to your house or place of living. Research is important. It will drive future improvements, and those curves will continue to get better. We just need to keep pushing it on.
Thank you so very much. Howard, you mind coming with Dr. Weston help us to give this audience and also Mildred and Justin and Shayla, thank you for putting together the program. Let's give everybody a round of applause for this morning. Excellent job with your online crew. There is a survey inside your brochure today. Please complete those forms. Complete those forms and get those to Shayla or to Mildred or to Justin today. And we're going to ask Howard, thank Energy and Great Energy West, and we'll be ready to go to lunch.
I just want to say thank you very much for what's going on, and Margaret, you've done a great job, and we just appreciate you opening up your door to that. Thank you, sir.
Let me end with this, and certainly, I missed my memo on the Senate panel. One of the reasons why this is critical is because we are in an environmental desert in that city. We have a challenge of dealing with 2 miles away, we have an enemy. We also have batch plants and environmental challenges in this quadrant of the city. So if you have these conversations, it echoes not just your health, but your overall lifestyle and mortality rate is in that. So not only what you eat, but what you breathe and what you're exposed to. So we want to say thank you. I want to first say thank you to Representative Tony Rose, because her office, Ms. Laura Kennedy, is here. They made this a possibility, so we first have to acknowledge that. Second, the Hill Collaborative team did a fantastic job with Ms. Pierre. She's keeping me back in here, so. But we work. And so our big charge is to get the word out and to continue to elevate the visibility and also the importance of the project. The college did an amazing work. My wonderful colleague Kelsey is up at the top, and I can never say enough thank you for always being present in the moment. So we're looking to do more. So September will likely be another opportunity for us to continue the conversation with the information that we're going to be able to share with everyone with this recording and other information. So grab material, let's get it out, and we're going to do our part to elevate the profile. Lastly, I cannot fail to speak to Ms. Madison Stafford, who is here, wonderful student leader of the college. So she made herself available here as well, so we acknowledge that. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Apologies that things didn't go quite cool as everybody wanted, but the information was hot. That was the hot part. The information was hot. So we look forward to the future. So thank you. Let's go grab one.